Thank you once again, Dr. Fabella, Ms. Lamentillo, Mr. Lau, and Dr. Monterola. Well, on to our next session. Is everybody ready? Yes? Yes, okay. Our planet is in code red. The color for this session is red. While AI continues to revolutionize industries and generate new opportunities, climate change simultaneously emerges as a dominant factor reshaping global systems and development trajectories. Experts warn that the economic cost of climate change could reach trillions if urgent action is not taken, reminding businesses that sustainability is no longer optional. Like AI, addressing climate risks requires responsibility, collaboration, and a clear long-term vision. With this in mind, the next discussion explores what nature-based solutions can do to restore the planet's health, and how enterprises across sectors can transform their operations to become drivers of sustainability. The session takes us back to nature for climate emergency. To help us walk through an exploring nature-based solution, our moderator is a principal consultant of Global Interconnections and a member of the Global Military Advisory Council on Climate Change. He is professor and academic program director in the Executive Masters in Disaster Risk and Crisis Management program at the Asian Institute of Management. Our moderator, Dr. Chad Briggs.
Hello, everyone. I realize that everyone is already tired of climate change. You've already gone through several storms the past few days. About a week ago, I was talking to the organizers of this conference, and I said, hey, there's this tropical typhoon that's going to be coming. No, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But it's important. And not just to talk about the scary things, not just to talk about the dark futures that we might have, but instead to talk about opportunities, to talk about how this changes how we think about both business, about politics, about how we act as individuals. And we have three great individuals here who can help us talk about this, to see things differently, and to talk about how things, both in terms of our politics and in terms of generational possibilities, that we can think of climate change in a different way. Now, our first panelist is a chef, farmer, and founder of the Cacao Project in the Philippines, which has supported over 200 farmers to plant more than 300,000 trees, reforesting 741 acres through regenerative agroforestry, and empowering local communities to build sustainable livelihoods. She is a National Geographic Explorer, Forbes Asia's 30 Under 30 honoree, BBC's 100 Most Inspiring Women, UN Environment Programme's Young Champion of the Earth, and an official TED speaker. She serves as an ambassador for the World Resources Institute's Food and Land Use Coalition and is a member of the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration Advisory Committee, dedicating her work to advancing climate action and environmental stewardship through farmer employment. Let's call in Ms. Louise Mabulo. Next, our second panelist is an Italian architect and sustainable design advocate, best known as the chairman and CEO of Italpinas Development Corporation, IDC, a pioneering green real estate firm in the Philippines. He has successfully merged Italian design excellence with environmentally responsible practices to create multi-awarded, energy-efficient, and climate-responsive buildings. Through IDC, he champions passive green design strategies and sustainable urban planning, frequently speaking at conferences to inspire the adoption of eco-friendly architecture. He is architect Romolo Nati. And to complete our experts, She is a diver, photojournalist, and diving instructor who has dedicated her life to protecting the marine ecosystem of her homeland from the devastating impacts of plastic pollution that has transformed once pristine waters into trash-filled seas, threatening fish and coral life. She's the executive director of Parley Maldives. Since 2015, she has led the implementation of Parley's comprehensive AIR strategy: avoid, intercept, and redesign plastics, turning waste into livelihood opportunities while mobilizing communities to reclaim their oceans through locally driven solutions to the global crisis. For her unwavering commitment to marine conservation with passion, vision, and inclusivity, ensuring her work will inspire future generations of Maldivians, she was recently honored as the 2025 Romolo Nati awardee. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Shaahina Ali. So I'd like to start by trying to talk about what the connection is between climate change, which many people refer to as if it was just this one single thing that exists out there, and the local experiences of people. And I'd like to start with you, Shaahina, because the experience of the Maldives has been where climate change has really shown the connection between the problems of ocean health, of food insecurity, and waste management. And your lecture last week to the Makati Foundation was really illuminating in terms of how it exposes these vulnerabilities. And I wonder if you could just start by talking about how is it that things like plastics and waste management are related to climate change?
Climate change is a big word. We hear it every day. We know it as climate change, but do we really know what climate change is? It's right in front of us, right? Maldives is a country that's over 750 kilometers in length and 400 kilometers wide. But that's all ocean. Only 1% of it is land. And the highest point of our sea level is less than 2 meters. So today, in the opening, a 1.5 meter sea level rise. It's not Kiribati that will be going. It will be also Maldives. And it's 500,000 people. Maldives is an amazing climate change mitigator. We have the 5th largest coral reef, if I'm not wrong. And we are impacted daily because climate change is a word that science explains it very thoroughly. And some of us gets it, some of us don't. We are so disconnected from it. In reality, we don't know how connected we are. For example, a coral reef, just now you saw all the colors and now you see it white. And that's what happened within a period of 1 week of temperatures going up to 35 degrees with an El Nino in 2016. This is pictures from 2016. This is dead coral, basically. It looks beautiful, but the coral polyp's gone and it's dead. And then, we have the reef collapses. And once the reef collapses, we have the little fish collapse. And when the little fish collapse, we have the big fish collapse. And, the whole ecosystem tumbles. So, a simple, we talk about 1.5 degrees. Half of us don't know why 1.5 degrees. That's what it takes for the coral reefs and half of the ice caps to melt, I think. And we need to bring that disconnection of such huge issues in such a connected world to connect us with it. Because we need to feel for it, we need to connect for it, we need to understand it for us to know what it's going to take away. Every day we see it, but do we see it? No. Philippines is 88% water, I hear. I just learned this time. Very similar to us, but you've got a higher ground to run to. But if the typhoons keep hitting, this is the first time I have ever experienced winds above 60 miles per hour. And Maldives just broke the record of 60 miles per hour 2 months ago. So, it's not only the El Ninos and the climate change. The climate's going to hit us with typhoons as well, because the belt, equator belt is moving. And we are getting hit with El Ninos more frequently. The last one before the 2016 was in 1997 or 98, if I'm not wrong. Then 2016, but in 2023 we had an El Nino. It's not giving enough time for our reefs to recover. And we have no land for agriculture. Talking about agriculture in the Maldives is an alien concept for us. Sustainable agriculture, of course, we can innovate agriculture, vertical farming and everything has to come for food security. It has to come. It has to be reachable. It has to be understood by us what is happening. So after I've been in platforms where you have the World Banks, the ADBs, the UNs, it's a different language at that level. We need to know in our language where people can take action, where I think people's voices should go to these boardrooms of big corporates. They need to connect themselves to what is happening to reality of their actions. It's not, I think it's simply not projects that are, written down, but it is simply firefighting now until something happens. Today's actually the title, Navigating Disruptions. We can't navigate anymore from disruptions because we are already on ground, or we are already marooned. We are on a reef already. There's nothing to navigate. Navigate disruptions. We need to just stop disruptions more. So we can't actually sugarcoat and go on with navigating around things and there's no time for us. There's no time.
All right. Louise, let me turn to you next, because your work, especially in agriculture and regenerative agriculture, really shows the connection, because when you work on, say, cacao beans, something that is a globally very important product but is very sensitive to changes in environmental conditions. So could you tell us about your experience on the ground in the Philippines, and perhaps not where we feel like we've run out of options, but perhaps where there are new options available?
Oh, thanks so much for that, Chad. I want to be a little bit more optimistic about what we have in store in our future, especially keeping in mind the recent typhoons. I want to acknowledge, of course, that many people went through great lengths to be here, and many people couldn't be here because of these storms, and all the communities impacted. And I began my work in the aftermath of something very similar, which was Typhoon Nocten. In 2016, on Christmas Day, it hit my hometown, and in one single overnight disaster, destroyed 80% of agricultural land in my hometown. You can see some slides of my hometown in the aftermath of these storms. And in the days following, we started interviewing farmers and asking them, why are you farming the way we were? Why is it that we're so impacted by these storms? How do we recover the best way that we can? And many of the farmers say, well, we've gotten used to these storms, and they're getting worse, and we're experiencing it more and more. And on the ground, it feels almost helpless and powerless to do anything to transition. They're growing rice and coconut, and as a previous panel mentioned, they only have around 2 hectares of land. And that's hardly anything to do with economies of scale. You cannot produce and become profitable on a monoculture on a smallholder farm. So we started looking into the way we were growing things and questioning why we did that. And one of the things that we discovered was agroforestry practices. And the reason why my initiative is called the Cacao Project is because one of the more resilient crops that was growing was cacao. We grow our initiative under 3 different branches, which is agriculture, education, and regeneration. Of course, through agriculture, we want to create these agroforests, which are ecosystems that provide economic benefits. So in the times of storms, these trees are growing to be windbreakers and something that can protect the community and their homes. When it comes to floods, of course, the cacao tree is more resilient to floods and it doesn't get cut down by coconut, but the soil is healthy enough to absorb water to prevent more flooding, which is something so basic and so simple, but we tend to lose that knowledge in the quest of making more profit out of our crops through monocultures. And of course, through education, we want to make sure that learning is a two-way street. We've been taught to grow fast, easy, cheap food. But our farmers there's so much more economic benefits that our forestries can do and our farmers can give. And so we want to learn how farmers used to grow food, because 50 years ago, food was just food and farming was just farming. There was nothing around climate or their carbon offsetting or the carbon dioxide that took out of the soil. But now it's become so much more complicated. So we want to understand how we can bring older knowledge into the modern day and be able to bring that scientific bridge for them as an intermediary. And through regeneration, we want more young people to farm. I do not look like a farmer by Filipino stereotypes. And we want more young people to understand that farming is just beyond hard labor and planting in a field. It's artistry, it's design, it's technology. And there's so much more that we can do, especially in this day and age where we need farmers and we need more people to understand the value of our food production system. It's more than that. It's nutrition, it's food supply, it's our safety, it's our peace and security. And with my work, we've worked with over 200, 300 farmers now. We've planted over hundreds of thousands of trees, reforesting nearly 800 acres of land. And we want to show the rest of the world that agriculture and these farmers are not just a statistic on the news. They're not just a report of victims of climate change. But farmers have so much to contribute and teach the rest of the world. We have our own ancestral knowledge, we have our own systems, and through this grassroots stewardship, we're able to do our small part in our small part of the world to not just be resilient and not just be victims of climate change, but to be able to contribute, teach people, show global policies, and parallel those models across the rest of the world. I mean, agriculture contributes 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and most people in the agricultural industry are smallholder grassroots farmers. So if we can transition that, it's the more easy industry to transition than energy. In fact, a mismanagement of food and land use systems cost the world about $12 trillion worth of damages, and it costs all of us, whether it's our taxpayers, our governments, our corporates, it's costing us money to do things unsustainably. But for every dollar that we reinvest into good food and land use systems, it creates over $30 of social and economic benefits. So there's a huge and long way we can do, and it is a good business practice to do the morally and ethically right thing.
All right, thank you. And Romolo, let me switch to the urban landscape a little bit then. So what opportunities exist in terms of either new building design, new neighborhood design, for cities that can, and your style has been described as biomimicry. So what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of not fighting against the environment, but working with it?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Biomimicry is an approach to design that takes inspiration from the natural world, so mainly from animals, from natural living structure. For example, before there were slides about corals. We did a project that took inspiration from corals. Years ago, it was a competition, and we call it Coral City. Taking inspiration from nature means that we take nature itself as the teacher. Nature has been around for millions, or if not billions of years, and so it's the best teacher if we want to learn how to design structure for communities, how it's possible to design structure that are able to withstand, for example, typhoon, or a structure that in some way, as you just mentioned, are capable to live in harmony with the surrounding. And also, when you talk about surrounding, the environment, it's not only the natural environment, but it's also the social, cultural environment. Nature does all of those. So biomimicry was even used by, it's nothing we invented recently, it was used also by Leonardo da Vinci when he was studying, when he was trying to anticipate a machine that can fly. So it's just an approach to design and I would say human creation that take inspiration from nature. So we study the nature carefully. In our case, when we design buildings, we use an approach called performance-based design. So our building, people say, your building look different from other buildings, and the reason is because they perform differently from other buildings. Nothing is there for no reason. Actually, nothing is there only for an aesthetic purpose. It's there because it has a certain function. So for example, in the Philippines, what we need to do in order to design and develop buildings that reduce their environmental impact is mainly to reduce the use of aircon, because aircon in the Philippines, like in most of the Southeast Asian countries, represent around 60% of the power consumption. So if we are able to reduce the consumption of aircon, we have a big impact on the reduction of power consumption, and this produces two benefits. One is for the environment, because most of the power is still produced with carbon fossil, so it produces CO2. And the other one is for the end users, I mean for the people that are living in the units, because they have a reduced power bill, which is important above all when we design and build for the economic market, where even 1,000 pesos can make the difference per month in the power bill. Same thing is for the water. What we do is we reduce, of course, water consumption through bathroom fixture, but not only, we also do rainwater harvesting and water recycling, where it's possible, mainly in the Philippines for the economic market. We do it for landscaping and secondary use of the water. So all these features make a building and a structure, and eventually a community, if we expand this process, a community, much more sustainable, and apart from that, is also economically more viable. Now, in general, the stereotype is that green buildings must be expensive, because also in my career, let's say, sometimes people ask me, so how much cost the materials that you use to build your green buildings? They ask me, how much is the price increase? Because the way we have been taught to think is that green buildings means a building that is built using high-tech materials, and high-tech materials, first, they need to be imported, most of them, and second, they cost a lot of money, because again, they are high-tech. We don't do that. I don't personally think that this is the future of real estate above all in developing countries. The future is more focusing on passive green strategies, which are mainly embedded in the design itself. Even if we look at the ancestral architecture in the Philippines, like Bahay Kubo, it's extremely well-performing. It's a green architecture, autochthon. I mean, it came from the place itself. The Filipinos don't have to import anything from outside in terms of ideas. They have everything they need. But Bahay Kubo is, to me, the perfect example of a well-designed and well-built structure, because it's built with the material that are sourced from the place, by the way, are also built from people that live in the place, and they are detached from the soil. This means that they are safe in case of flooding, and also they have vertical ventilation, natural ventilation. They also have horizontal cross ventilation. And so this is an architecture that can show that you don't need to be high-tech in terms of materials. You need to be smart in the way you design. So that's what we do with Italpinas, the company that I founded here in the Philippines in 2009, together with my partner, Filipino partner, Giorgio Leviste. And this can also be, I would say, a receipt for success, because we are bringing many stereotypes. A green building shouldn't be expensive. Green buildings can also be beautiful. Green buildings can also bring advantages to the end users, not only to the environment, it's also to the community. And they have lower maintenance costs at advantage of the end users. And of course, and also actually they can be built in the provinces. That's what we do actually, because also sustainability passes from there. I mean, where you build your projects. I mean, a sustainable growth in a country like the Philippines is a multipolar kind of growth. It cannot everything be concentrated in one point like Manila or Cebu. There are 7,500 islands. A sustainable and inclusive development means that we need to go to develop outside Metro Manila. So all these elements are the value proposition of Italpinas, and of course I'm very proud of being one of the founder of the company. And above all, I think Philippines, which by the way doesn't shine in terms of number of startups in the world, in terms of number of startups, to me instead it's a perfect place for startups because you have a very young generation, and startups in general are created by young mind people. I mean, young generation that are hungry to prove themselves.
So if the green buildings aren't more expensive, why aren't they built more often? I mean, just to point out, right across the corner from us is a yellow triangle. And originally was meant to be part of flood control for Makati, right? Because you can use parks as a way to actually absorb floodwaters rather than just being impermeable surfaces. But that hasn't happened necessarily. Or just down the road here on De La Costa, right? New buildings going up, new parks, but they're not green. Why is that?
Okay, because there are mainly two ways to design and build a green buildings. One is using active green design strategies, and the other one is passive green design strategies. When we talk about active green design strategies, it means that, for example, if we design and build a skyscraper with curtain wall, means that it has all glasses around the facade. We know that in places like the Philippines, where I mean we have a high temperature all year long, when the sun hits the facade, inside we have an increase of temperature for a process that is called greenhouse effect. So in order to avoid that, you need to I'm talking, for example, this skyscraper in Makati that are green and are truly green. I'm not saying they are not. Very expensive. So you need to use particular kind of glasses that are imported, and they cost quite a lot of money. On top of that, you also need to use special kind of air con system that are green. You need to use special lighting that are green. All these material that are green, but they have a very high, in general, very high embedded power consumption. I mean, to produce that particular material at the source, a lot of power was utilized. So at the end, you have a certified green buildings that is green because it consumes less energy and most probably less water, but it's really not cheap. Why? Because in some way, my point of view is that you design that building with the same old approach that was used to design all buildings. The only thing you did, you use a lot of high-tech features in order to reduce the power consumption and the water consumption so that you get the green accreditation. I'm not saying that this is a wrong operation if it makes financial sense, but I don't think that the Philippine real estate sustainability problem will be solved by this kind of project, which are targeting a very small percentage of the overall population in the Philippines, maybe 0.2%. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this gets to a question I have for Shaahina. So the Maldives are an example of a country where you can't be blamed for making bad choices because the choices there are limited, correct? In terms of everything has to be imported, so building materials, energy availability. So the question I'm asking you is, rather than just blaming the end users and the consumers, what would you say that the business leaders need to do? What changes do companies need to make in order to make things better for a country like the Maldives?
I think the companies need to really rethink of the way they deliver the things. It's very easy for companies to actually budget in, for example, CSR. It's very easy to say this percentage of our profit will go to CSR, which will fund like cleaning up in the Maldives, for example. But what happens is we we have even a toothpick is imported to the Maldives. We have nothing, no production. We have, 70% of our GDP is from tourism and tourism related. 10%, 15% is fishing, and then you have some businesses. But, we have no exports, so we have nothing to export. That is so that our collection of plastics and beach cleanup plastic was the third largest export out of the country, other than fish and aviation fuel, which is, so, the companies can actually start rethinking and re-strategizing. And if they have to reinvest in making it better, the packaging is better, styrofoam, for example. I see now the the televisions and, all these appliances that come into the Maldives, now that like TVs, especially Sony and companies, they have changed to cardboard, which is, at least better than plastic, but at least it still needs to be got rid of. But what is happening is that we need, even if we have to fund the companies or give them interest-free loans to reinvest in other packaging that is more sustainable, instead of spending that CSR money to clean up, the same thing they're going to again send, and we have to keep cleaning. We need to break that cycle of thought. Companies need to re-strategize. Companies need to rethink. That's where I'm coming from. We need to actually, for example, plastic production. We have 3 major bottling companies, and they can easily bottle for the Maldives with aluminum, because aluminum recycled can be reused again to can. But plastic recycled, you can't really bottle water in it again. And 9% is on the recycle, so we can't even talk about plastic recycling as a solution, because we have learned that it's not recycled. What we do in the Maldives is we actually intercept, because that's fighting for the environment. And every piece of waste we create in the Maldives, with a 2 million tourists and 500,000 population, we are burning it. It's ending up in the environment. We have low combustion burning. We landfill with it. So basically, the companies have to change. And I think the ISO standards, Singapore is a company that I think is looking into it, and one of them, they say everything that's imported to Singapore has to be up to a certain standard. And they are actually eliminating a lot of the styrofoam and the plastics that are actually coming with it.
All right, thank you. And could you just mention a bit about the microplastics as well? Because that's a topic that came up last week. Because it's not just about the visible plastic, right?
It's not about the visible plastic. We have styrofoam is everything. Styrofoam. Yesterday from my hotel at Maksasai Institute, with the storm, there were waves that had washed over onto the highway. And all of it was styrofoam, little pieces of white, little pieces of styrofoam. This is in the Maldives on the white beach. You cannot see it. You cannot see the styrofoam, but there's a lot of styrofoam. So the plastics that we can clean up, we can't sieve the old sand. The fish is eating it. The corals are, the phytoplankton are eating the microplastic. It's in our body. If we test our blood, we have all the bisphenol, all the chemicals that are in plastics and forever chemicals. Agriculture, we are actually using so much chemicals and fertilizers in the Maldives for their home gardening and agriculture that our water table is contaminated. We burn the waste, and when it rains, it takes all the chemicals from the plastics into the water table. And a chili we eat or a mango we eat is contaminated with microplastics and chemicals. So, that's how connected it is to our environment and to us.
So Louise, how do we change that? In the sense of, when we were talking, and I've heard this before, very often from my students, they would look at this title, the Resilient Future, and would say, stop calling us resilient. We don't want to be called resilient because it's used as an excuse not to do anything. A storm hits, you'll bounce back. Earthquake comes, we'll rebuild. Bahala na, what's to be done? So why is that? Why do especially younger generations not want to be called resilient? And what do they want to see instead in terms of action?
Let's be honest, Chad. we young people are tired. We were born into a world where we looked into the future and saw a utopia. And as we're growing older, we're seeing less and less of that utopia, and we're seeing very much a dystopia. We live in a very post-capitalist world where we're not assured of our future, if we'll even have clean water, if we'll have breathable air, if we'll have no microplastics in our body. A very interesting study is that people tried to study how much microplastics were in our body, but they couldn't find a control group that had no microplastics, nowhere across the world. And that's how dangerous it is. And we're walking into a very uncertain future. And we're being asked to be as optimistic as possible. So resilience, we're very tired of being called resilient. I think now is a time for holy rage and outrage at the systems that have been built. And it's also time for action. We're not just going to be mad or angry. I don't want to be an angry activist. I want to be someone who does something, who's solutions-oriented, who finds a way to move forward, and who creates a new system. I mean, with the world systems right now, with 30% being going to of global greenhouse gas emissions going to energy, 30% of it being because of agriculture, and we're not even counting methane. We're seeing a very doom and gloom, dreary world, but I think there's so much hope. So in terms of transitioning and adapting and shifting and mitigating the climate crisis, we're not totally at the end. We've already passed the 1.5 degree centigrade threshold that the United Nations said would become the overshoot scenario. We're past it. The past year, we've recorded temperatures exceeding 1.5. In some regions, it goes over 5 degrees Celsius. But there is a way forward. In my industry, agriculture, do you know how much money is being allocated into subsidies that go into unsustainable farming practices? Any guesses from the audience? Let's wake everyone up a little bit. A lot. Okay, I hear from the front, a lot. You think it's in the millions, in the billions? It's in the billions, actually. There is about, let me get this stat right, about 600 billion US dollars is being allocated into unsustainable agriculture worldwide. So all of these subsidies go into mass agriculture that's extracting from our planet. That's the 30% statistic we're seeing. Do you know how much it would cost to transition farms into regenerative agriculture that is carbon neutral or even carbon negative? Any guesses? No? 400 billion US dollars. So only a small segment of the subsidies that go into agriculture would it take to transition already 30% of the climate crisis. It's very easy, but there's no incentive for people to begin that transition. And so with my cacao project, it's a very small project in the middle of nowhere, Philippines, rural town, front line of the climate crisis, but we want to create an example that agriculture can be profitable, it can be regenerative, it can be done by smallholder farmers. So why can't bigger corporates or bigger governments create those incentives for the farmers? Because the right thing to do is becoming easier and cheaper. Renewable energy is becoming the cheaper option. All of these different options are there. The solutions exist in the world. We just need to implement them, fund them, and do them.
And I should point out, most of you, of course, are aware of Filipino coffee. Yes. Filipino chocolate is a thing, and it may be artisanal at this point, but I've had some of it when I was in Bohol. Go find it. You're in San Fernando?
I'm in San Fernando, Camarines Sur. Our chocolates are delicious, but you have to try it for yourselves and tell me.
Yes. Romolo, let me ask, because you're talking about how many of your projects are really focused on the provinces, correct? So what do those projects need? I mean, is it financial support? Is it more knowledge that there are alternative building practices that could be done? Is it more integration with renewable energy? What is it that's needed just for people to be aware that there are options possible? And I ask this because last year when I flew into Batanes, it was really notable that not a single solar panel anywhere. And here you have isolated islands that are completely dependent on imported diesel fuel that could really benefit from the sort of style and the sort of codes that you're talking about. So what does it take for these things to be adopted in the Philippines?
You mentioned photovoltaic panels, no? You know that in order to make the installation of photovoltaic panels feasible and profitable for residential buildings, you need to have in place the net metering system, no? Which is that system that allows the end users also to be a producer. Means that you don't need to buy the battery, because the problem of solar panels is they produce power during the day, but you may need power during the night. So you need to buy the battery, and the battery are extremely not environmentally friendly and very expensive, and they expire, no? After a few years. So if you have the net metering system, you are able to sell the energy when you produce more than what you use, and to buy back when the energy from the grid when you cannot produce. In this way, you have a very good balance between what you buy and what you sell. And theoretically, your balance can even be zero, no? So, for example, this is the implementation of the net metering system, which was, if I'm not wrong, approved in the Philippines in 2012, to make sure that all the energy distributed in the Philippines have the capability to implement the net metering system. It will be a big help for people, developers, to install the photovoltaic panels, because at that point they will become really very feasible, and you are going to have a huge positive impact on the CO2 production, all those things. But for example, this is still lacking, you know, because I remember that when we did our first building and we installed photovoltaic panels on the rooftop, the name of the building is Primavera Residences in Cagayan de Oro. At the end, they told us that everything was in place, but then the net metering system was not working. So for several years, we had photovoltaic panels that only produce power during the day, and in the night there was no way. Now, for example, in Cagayan de Oro, they have been working. I think it's Sepalco, the company there. And so now we have a more massive photovoltaic panel on the rooftop of our building, and the end users, the condominium, so they spend less money for their power. Why I'm mentioning that? Because this is a typical practical example how a government institution can help a faster development of green buildings. Apart from that, I would say infrastructure obviously is very important, because provinces needs bridges, roads, airport, ports, apart from education, many other things, but that's not really what we are talking today. So government can help in these regards. Also incentives, no? Because I remember years ago when I started, there was a BOI incentives for innovation, innovative corporation, and it was very good, because I think for 3 years we pay only 5% taxes on the gross revenue. I don't know if still there, maybe not more. So all these incentives, everything that can help companies to be more innovative can help to reshape the industries and within the industry real estate development. That's, I think, something very practical.
So how cooperative are companies like Aboitiz in Morocco in assisting these sorts of transitions?
Sorry?
How cooperative are companies like Aboitiz in Morocco in assisting these? Should this be part of their ESG?
You know, I don't know that. Maybe it's not in their immediate priority to allow end users to become also producer, because they may lose some market share. But I don't know. This has just come to my mind. I think that it should be this up to more to the government to give clear direction and rules and regulation in such a way that the distributor and all the private company that in some way have a privileged position in certain areas become more flexible. And you know, because innovation, it's good for some, but not so good for others. You know, it's always like that. You know,
Yeah.
every time we have a new product, a new service, who before control the market in certain areas, it may be not so happy, you know, because again, he can lose market.
We had an example with the Air Force. This was years ago, but having done an assessment for Hawaii, especially for the island of Oahu, it was the power companies that, you're right, they didn't have an incentive, but the government, realizing that this was a security issue, stepped in and then said, look, you've got to solve this. And so, yeah, maybe it takes some political will as well.
Yeah, you know, I have a nice story because our company for several years was also investing in real estate, in renewable energy. And so I helped some, even foreign company, they wanted to join venture, stuff like that, no? And so there was a very interesting project to produce renewable energy with photovoltaic panels in remote areas like islands, where the power is still produced with bunker, diesel engine, things that are extremely poor performing and very polluting. And so the business model was really very good. It makes sense for all stakeholders. But of course, the intent was to replace the bunker with the photovoltaic panel. So everybody were happy, except that one entity, that was the owner of the bunker, because you say, you put the photovoltaic panels, everybody will be happy, what about my bunker? You know what I mean? And at the end, there was so much obstruction that I told to the people they wanted to do this business, no, this is too difficult to implement, because the obstruction from some stakeholders that have not really the interest aligned with yours, it may create problems. So you understand when innovation is not always good for everybody.
Well, and it's true that it could be part of CSR, ESG, however we define it. But Shaahina, you mentioned before that there's a risk in, say, corporations funding NGOs to help with environmental issues. That this could shift the identity, perhaps, or at least the mission of dealing with climate change. Could you just mention what you meant by that?
What I meant was that sometimes, you know, as CSOs or NGOs, we write for grants, and we get grants, or we get CSR funding. So a lot of times we are desperate to get the funds to do some work, and a lot of times it's the young communities and people, but they're compromised in their passion, in their vision, because the funders will have a, you know, it comes with a contract or an agreement and a co-branding, and then it doesn't really give them that freedom to really communicate that passion throughout the community. So what happens is, for example, bottling company kind of giving a grant and then having reduced plastic pollution. We do everything, we do beach cleanups, and you have the logo of the biggest plastic producers in the country on there. You know, it doesn't actually vocalize your cause. So, but the funding forces us to put the logo. Funding forces us to put advertising for them. Sponsors logos on any banner or anything we have. So a lot of times what I feel our NGOs have is that they compromise on there, and they get the funding, they do it, but on ground level it works. But on a convincing level for people who are already so tired of the plastic, and it doesn't work, because the community say, oh, you take the money from them and you are just coming here, making us throw that, and you come here to clean it. But they don't, that's what I'm saying, connection. So what I like about Pale is that we co-brand only with a lot of due diligence, but a lot of the people don't have that capacity to do it. We have it. We have global support as well. And the strategy is called Avoid, Intercept, Redesign. And it's very easy to convince the communities that to look at their plastic footprint or their carbon footprint, not just plastic, their fossil fuel, their carbon, you know, their emissions. And then change. So if they're buying a refrigerator, buy an inverter refrigerator. Or if they're changing a bulb, change it to a LED light. I mean, these are things that we try to tell them that avoiding is about for climate change. Avoid and be good. Not just plastic, but everything else. And then intercept. If you must use it until it changes, let's dispose it responsibly, at least in the Maldives. There's nothing we can do, we burn it. But at least the 3,000 tons of PET we have exported is out of the Maldives and repurposed. But the other issue with funding is that it comes with like you cannot pay for overheads, so it's very, very difficult for CSOs to work without overheads or without, to be 100%. So you have there's a very strict how you can use the funding for. And a lot of times for small CSOs that want to make an impact in their community, it doesn't, that they have challenges. And we have to, a lot of times, intervene and give them the funding that actually can make them do the work that they are funded for by the polluting companies. So that happens. For example, a cleanup. If there's no back end, you do a beach cleanup with 100 people, within 45 minutes, you can take a ton of plastic. And it goes into an already overburdened landfill, and they have to burn it. So it might as well stay in the beach for a while until we have a solution that's coming. And I hope it is soon, because government and I think, if I'm not wrong, ADB and World Bank, they're investing heavily in our incineration. And a lot of my people, young people who are angry, they don't believe in incineration. And they're saying incineration is not a solution. But right now it is a solution, because low combustion burning versus incineration, we have so much historical waste that we need to get rid of. Another solution has to come. And I have hope, because I see a lot of young people here, and I want them to do good and think good for the planet. And people who are here, my generation has made the planet like this. And I hope that before we leave, we could at least show them and guide them, because they're resilient. I don't want to use the word, but resilient. They're actually very passionate people. And they're angry. They're very angry people. And this anger can be directed in the right direction. And I think we can make a change once we direct the anger.
All right, thank you. And I should point out the backlog of plastic waste applies very much here to Metro Manila as well. Now, there's an online question that I think is directed to you, Louise. So what kinds of innovation is the agricultural sector in the Philippines currently really looking for, especially that the youth can become involved in?
Oh, I love this question. All right, so I'm sorry for being such a geek. I'm going to throw more stats at you, because I'm a nerd. I love reading my stats. I love reading UN reports for fun. The world requires 70% more food by 2050. It means in order to feed the world, we need to be producing 70% more food. However, we are also eroding 3 football fields worth of soil per second. Each second that I've just spoke, that's 3 football fields worth of soil. I was at FAO in Rome about 2 weeks ago, and one of their stats is that we have about 60 years worth of harvests left. Also here in the Philippines, the average age of farmers is at around 57 to 60 years old, which means in at least 15 years' time, we won't have any more farmers, especially if no more young people want to farm. And we see that not many young people want to farm anymore. So we need to find a few young people who can help us innovate and be intermediaries. I believe that innovation is not just looking forward into the future with your big tech and AI solutions. I mean, it also includes that. But it also involves reaching back and being the people who are intermediaries for our elderly farmers and being able to give them better access. So the previous panel talked about how, we could democratize AI a little bit. In another life, I'm a documentary show host for a TV show called Tech to Save the World. That's a shameless plug. Please do watch it. But in that show, we explored how we can use technology beyond AI and beyond tech or IoT or blockchain, and how we can use these technologies and put it in the hands of the people who need to use it more. Oftentimes, we're using it for school, writing an essay, making a Facebook post. But what if farmers can use it? What if an AI on my phone, could tell me about my farm? I could put sensors in the soil, and it would tell me, oh, farm zone A needs more potassium, or it needs more irrigation, in a language that I speak, in Bicolano, in Tagalog, or whatever language that you say. And then you can say, hey, can you turn on the taps and irrigate the farm? Or put fertilizer into zone A. I feel like that's how we should be using technology. But we're not going to be able to reach that kind of future without more young people innovating and being on the ground and putting those solutions within the places where they live. So the solutions don't necessarily have to be high tech. It can just be a young person saying, hey, why don't we do agroforestry? Once upon a time, agroforestry and farming was considered innovation. It could just be a young person saying, hey, we have smallholder farms. Let's find a way to maximize profitability for those 2-hectare farms. I believe that environmentalism should be the more profitable case. One of my advocacies is environmental psychology, that the better, easier, cheaper thing to do should be the thing that's good for the environment. We live in a structure where it's not. To eat organic and healthy is more expensive. To live on a plastic-free world is more expensive. But as young people, we can vote with our wallets, we can change those systems, or we can look at these problems and the plethora of the doom and gloom in front of us and say, hey, these are opportunities for me to innovate and find solutions. So I can't give you the answer to what solution the agricultural sector is looking for. I think if you're a young person who asks this, it's your job to find what that solution is. It could be anything. It could be very simple, low tech, or it could just be being an intermediary and bringing technology and social media to the farms in the middle of nowhere and helping those helping elderly farmers have more access to markets. Putting their produce on Facebook Marketplace, showing people how much their produce costs so they don't get scammed by middlemen. It's a very simple thing. So there's a lot of different solutions we can take, and plenty of choices for the road ahead.
And at least I've learned that the middlemen are one of the biggest issues for farming in the Philippines, at least access to markets. Do we have questions from the audience? I'd love to hear from people, any questions? Yes, there in the back, to 34.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm John Carlo from the University of Santo Tomas, and I'm currently taking up computer science. And my question for Miss Louise is, as young innovators, we often focus on visible issues like pollution and carbon emissions, but many environmental problems go unnoticed. What are some of these overlooked challenges, and how can innovation be directed toward uncovering and addressing them before they escalate?
Oh, there's a lot of invisible challenges. I think a couple of them would be social. Sometimes we want to help people, but we come in with a savior mentality and we think, I have all the solutions. And I think I started off with that problem as well. And it takes a lot of listening and studying and being within those communities to realize, actually, the solution is so much more simple. Solutions don't have to be like immediate Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg types of, what do you call that? Interjections into the community. It could be, let's have a conversation with each other. Oftentimes it's misunderstanding. Sometimes one of the bigger issues, I think, with climate, especially with a recent typhoon, is that we cannot teach environmentalism, climate, restoration to people living on hand-to-mouth, day-to-day subsistence. It's impossible. You'll never be able to teach them. In order for farmers and smallholders to do something that is good for the environment, it also has to make economic sense for them. And oftentimes solutions create dependency, and we need to eliminate that dependency. That's one of the things. Another thing is, if you want to be more technical, like microplastics, fertilizers, all these different things in the air and atmosphere destroying our soil, we don't see them. That's another aspect that we don't see. And it's depleting our nutrition. Right now, a single apple, a single apple from the 1980s, 20, 30 years ago, it actually has the nutrition of 6 apples now, because we are depleting our nutrition and depleting our soils, that our food's becoming less nutritious. It's insane to think that I'm growing into a world where I'm being less healthy by eating less or eating something healthy. So we don't see those things, but there are so many issues that we can't see. Social, financial, I think more funding definitely needs to go into our smallholder farmers, and funding is not going where it needs to be, and we don't see those pathways. And again, with chemicals and what we put into our bodies and soil, that's another thing. So I hope that answers your question. There's another one in table 24.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't see that behind the cameras.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tan Rafa from the University of the Philippines. And this is not directed to a specific panelist, but you mentioned earlier that we could live in a future where we do not have any farmers anymore. And that is mainly because the children of the farmers are made to believe that they should study to not become farmers. And that is the reality on the ground, especially in the provinces where I come from. A lot of the children of the farmers are said, mag-aral ka na mabuti para hindi ka maging magsasaka paglaki mo. And in that, we see that it is not just a matter of preference, but a deep societal judgment and a societal issue that farmers are being judged in our country, which is deeply ironic because we are supposedly an agricultural country. So yes, we can suggest more exposure in social media, which will connect it to the youth. But policy-wise, what can we change with the curriculum? What can we do in a larger scale so that the society does not see farmers as lesser compared to other fields in our country?
There's a lot of things we can do. Okay, one of them is language. I mean, policy, yes, we'll get to policy. I'll start with language. When you fail in school, sasabihin sa'yo, mangangamote ka, you're gonna become a sweet potato farmer, or pupulutin ka sa kangkungan. And those languages instill in children, oh my goodness, failure equals agriculture, farming, being on the field. Terrible. When you think of a farmer, you think of an elderly person in the field. Again, I don't look like a farmer. I don't look like I'm gonna go home to a cacao farm that's been ravaged by a typhoon, do I? But I am. And I think that's a societal stereotype that we've already deeply ingrained, is because farming has been historically unprofitable in the Philippines, which is why with my work, I want to create a business case where farming is profitable. I want to change the narrative around agriculture. I mean, it's integrated into curriculums that you should show farmers as someone who's well off. I grew up in South Wales in the UK, and when my mom told me about farming there, when I went to the farms, they're huge, vast fields and valleys of sheep. Farmers owned tractors. They were rich. And so I came to the Philippines with that stereotype that farmers are rich, and I was so shocked to find that wasn't the case. And I think it begins in school, it begins in language, it begins in how we frame our curriculums, showing good examples of farmers, but it also begins in creating an economic case for farmers here. They have been historically. The fact is, agriculture has been historically a low-income industry, and we have to make it a better income, more profitable industry. One of my advocacies with the Cacao Project is that we want to make sure that we imagine what development looks like. It's not another strip mall. It's not another subdivision. It's not another house. It could be a forest. The way we look at vineyards in Napa Valley, the way we look at wine producers, champagne producers in France, they are very wealthy families. Why can't we do the same here in the Global South for agroforests, for rice fields? When it's Global North, it's, I'm a farmer, but I'm a vineyard owner, I'm a producer. But then it turned into commodities once you reach a Global South country. So I want to make farming cool. I want to make farming sexy, as they say, but I don't want it to be cool and sexy until it is the environmentally right thing to do and until it is the profitable thing to do for our local communities. And it's very possible. We just have to reframe this. It's a rebranding issue, I think, but it's also a very deeply seated policy issue where we need to fund our farmers. We need to value them a lot more. And I agree. I think there's so much more we could do. Policy is one of them, society. I think our generation can play a role in changing that perception. But it also means that we have to transform this industry and adapt it to something that's a little bit better than it is.
As someone who grew up in a farm, yes. But Shaahina, I'd also like to follow up with you because you're a photojournalist, right? And so how is it that you've used your ability to portray images of the marine environment in the Maldives to sort of shift people's perceptions of what is possible and what futures could be?
I think imagery is very, very easy to communicate with. More than that, I think my strongest point is that I've been diving since I was about 12 or 13, so I've been in the ocean. And that connection, to take that personal connection, the fisherman, for example, I go on a fishing boat and I go with the bait fisherman to collect the bait fish. And when the corals are going white, they don't know what's happening. and then explaining to them, taking a piece of coral and saying every hole is that tiny animal that makes the coral alive. They break the coral when they fish for bait, they skin dive and they put the net around it. So to make them understand that so much symbiotic connection goes into the reef and the fish, and it's easier to convince them to do the right thing. For example, a fishing boat that goes out from Male, from the islands, out to fish will take about 24, 25 cases of bottled water, which is, quite a lot of bottles. 3 days later, they come back, there's not a single bottle on the boat. What happened? They just clean the boat before they come into the harbor. For them, the ocean takes it all, but that doesn't happen anymore and then taking them on a cleanup and showing that their bottles have washed up. And then they say, this is not our bottle. And then they pick up bottles, and I normally have started photographing foreign litter that has washed up onto our shores. And the other day, just before my presentation, there was a film, and they showed 6 brands or 7 brands of the biggest plastic bottle producers in Philippines. And 3 of the bottles that are photographed are from the Philippines. So, the ocean has no boundaries. So making them actually connect to the ocean is, so that's why in the 90s, when I started, I thought, I'll shift from working in NGO. I was working for Worldview International Foundation, which was a communication agency and development support communication. But then I moved to running a dive center. And this was the first dive center that was set up in the capital island that the locals had access to be trained as dive instructors. Mind you, 99%, 100% of the employment in the dive schools, in the resorts by 1990 was foreigners. So we started training, and in 10 years, we trained, 15 years, we trained almost 1,500 locals dive instructors, and they are actually, in return, in their communities, in running guest houses and taking school kids snorkeling and connecting. You'll be surprised that you go to a school in Maldives and say, how many kids can swim? There'll be about 10, 5 hands up. How many have been to a zoo? There'll be like 20, 30 hands up. To go to a zoo from the Maldives, you have to travel abroad to India or Sri Lanka or anywhere in the world. So this is so disconnected there with nature, and our education system is changing to we don't anymore do experiments. We don't look at a bean, sprout and grow, and we don't look at a caterpillar turn into a butterfly. We have no patience, like I was saying. Everything is on YouTube. So the teacher just put a YouTube video and say, here, that's how a caterpillar changes to a butterfly. So the kids don't actually learn to look at nature. They don't look at a flower anymore. They don't look at a bee anymore. There's so much disconnection in a connected world. And Dr. Rahul was saying that we are using that, and we are actually are we doing the right thing? Nature needs a lot of patience. And nature will have the patience. We don't have the patience. We will be destroyed. And I think we need to get more people to use their frontal cortex of their brains. I think castration is a choice. If I had a choice, I would do that, to let them be more compassionate towards nature and to take a more personal level of connecting people to the nature. I would like those who have never been in the ocean to go to the ocean. The ocean gives you your second breath. That's why when you go near the sea or to the beach, you're always happy. That's your happy place.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? Let's see, we've there in the back.
Hello. Hello, I'm Joanna from Far Eastern University. So recently, a state of calamity was declared in Negros Oriental, Visayas, my hometown, after an ethanol waste spill from a major corporation contaminated seas. It spread to about 3,000 hectares along the Tanyan Strait, a protected seascape and deemed the largest protected seascape in the Philippines, and harmed livelihoods. Up until now, the waters remain contaminated and communities are still suffering. A strong reminder of how industrial progress can backfire on communities. So given this, how can global and corporate leaders ensure that sustainability commitments translate into real accountability, especially when profit and environmental responsibility collide?
Yes, a very, very good question. I think the issue is not policy. We have the right policies. We have a lot of policies. I think Philippines, I've not looked at your environmental policies, but definitely Maldives has a lot of policies. But I think the priority is not there. I mean, in governments like the Maldives or probably in Philippines, India, I mean, the whole South Asian region, it is who you know in the government. So if your company has a huge issue, then you make a phone call to someone who knows someone to who, someone, and that someone will grant you that your escape route or your your jail-free card. So that culture, nepotism, corruption, everything we stand for, we should stand for, is gone in our politics. In our, there is so much nepotism that people in places are not the right people. They are connected people. They are. It's kind of a gangster style of rule and law right now in governments, and sad to say, I mean, we are suffering, the countries, the environment, and also like I always have said that certain decisions, environment decisions that actually compromise the environment should not be taken on a consultative role or a vote, because environment, you can convince a voting population to vote for a cause. For example, destroying a mangrove. You can get a community to vote by, giving them something. But that mangrove is not yours to vote to be destroyed. That mangrove is for the future generations that are not here yet. So we can never be that democratic when it comes. Somebody has to take a decision for the environment, for the unborn, for the future. And that decision, I'm afraid, I mean, you are my only hope to take over the government seats, get rid of that nepotism, be honest to what you believe and you've studied and learned, and then, way forward. And I hope, and my hope is only in the young people.
Thank you. In table 20?
Good afternoon. I'm Geraldine from the Asian Institute of Management, a student of Dr. Chad. So I'd like to ask, how can we shift from resilience to regeneration as the core principle of climate action in Asia?
Romolo, I'm going to turn this to you first because it's... All right. What do you mean?
Really, I don't have an answer, to be honest. I mean, in conference panels like this one, we always talk about big plan, huge goals, but at the end, I always think that we go home and if we do not change our habit, in our everyday things that we do. I mean, we can keep talking again about huge goals and plans, but nothing will happen. I like that saying that the problem of environmental degradation is that everyone thinks that someone else will save the planet, no? And that's what I see, and it's also frustrating, obviously, for myself. I think for everyone, no? So I think that rather than, I mean, it's important focusing on these big things, but I think at the end we should, I don't know, tonight we go home and we start to trying to be a little more minimalist also in the way we live, and using less plastic, less paper, less vehicles, also moving around. For example, I know the Filipinos don't walk, or closing the water when you are brushing your teeth. I think these small things, maybe I may look silly, but I think that's what make the difference, Because you multiply this one for 7 billion people, and you will see that you are going to have a very huge effect positive effect on the future of this planet, and also we give a sense, a meaning to conferences like this one. So that's my few words.
Well, we're in the last minute, so I'm afraid we can't take more questions. But I would like to point out that those are important because we need to show our own leadership. We can't be hypocritical and say other people should act this way. But I think it is, and I agree with what Shaahina and Louise and Romolo, what you'd said. We need the younger generation, though, to put political pressure. Because one thing that has always come up in our discussions in my program is that, you're right, we can have the best legislation, but if it's not implemented, if it's not actually monitored, if it's not actually enforced, then it doesn't matter. And that takes political will, it takes political pressure, it takes people saying these things are important, not just, climate change isn't some boutique issue that we say, oh, okay, well, this is Molly, she's in the climate office, she'll take care of it, right? But we need to act as a force to say that we can change things rather than we'll just wait and be resilient and next thing that happens just happens. So thank you very much. Can I give everyone a round of applause for the...
Thank you very much to our panelists, Ms. Louise Mabulo, architect Romolo Nati, and Ms. Shaahina Ali, as well as to our moderator, Dr. Chad Michael Briggs.
Well, the words that resonated really is hope and a lot of optimism. And I'm really happy to hear that from folks who have been there on the ground, giving us hope that there is hope, despite the anger we have over our climate crisis. All right. Don't forget to access our survey and feedback form. You've got that right on your table. So if you're happy about something or not too happy about something that's gone on, please write it down because our organizers would appreciate that. It could only make us better, right? So please take part, do your part in being engaged in all our conversations. So let's all take a 10-minute break, shall we? And be back at 4 p.m., right on the dot, for our final session on day one at AFES.